5-year-old Dmitri was born with cerebral palsy. There is no medical cure for this condition.
When Dmitri was born, the doctors told us he might never be able to walk, never be independent, that he would have, since this was a chronic disease, certain damage to his health that he might never recover from. We had not tried any alternative. Personally, I trusted nothing but the standard approaches. Until some people we trusted, because we knew them well, told us about Eric.
We think of healing as getting up out of wheelchairs, vision returning, hearing returning, cancers disappearing, all sorts of things. And these things happen. They happen.
The idea initially was just to attend a seminar that might show us some ways to help Dmitri as a family.
This little boy's parents came up and said, will I do a healing session after a presentation that I gave? And I said, well, they're closing the room, but let me finish signing these books and we'll get them to keep the room open for just a little bit longer. What's wrong? And they explained he had cerebral palsy.
After the seminar was completed, they met for the first time, just for a short while, about 10 or 15 minutes.
There's something in cerebral palsy that's very common where your feet, instead of your feet being able to be flat on the ground, the heel was up. So his heel would not be able to touch the ground. He was scheduled for surgery for that. He had to wear supports and braces. For him to be able to get up, he'd have to hold on to furniture or people's clothing. For him to be able to go down any steps at all, he'd have to sit down on the steps and push himself down a step at a time. And to go up, he'd have to crawl on his hands and knees.
We stepped on the stage with Dmitri, put him on the bed that was there, and told him that he should stay calm and collaborate with Eric, and that nothing would happen that might bother him. It was strange for us to think that this man was trying to heal him using his hands, and yet without actually touching him.
He got up after 4 minutes and was not just walking, he was jumping and he was running.
It was a huge surprise and a great joy for us. But at the same time, we were left wondering, how does this all work? So fast, so directly, and so effectively. He was walking properly, not standing on his tiptoes. And there was no need for anyone to help him climb the stairs, which was what usually happened. Other children may naturally walk up and down the stairs every day, but Dmitri was unable to do this, so accomplishing such things is very important for him.
They brought him back down for another session. He had one hand that was closed. I didn't know. He looked at me in Greek. He said, look, I can open my hand. He was just 5. He said, it doesn't hurt anymore. He said, look, I can hold a glass and drink by myself.
Now his fist is open. It is relaxed and cooperates with the left hand much better, which is very helpful. It's not closed into a fist, which bothered him a lot. And when he wants to give us a hug, he used to do it with only one hand. Now he gives a full hug and says, you see, I can do it. I'm a big boy now. Of course, his hand isn't fully functional yet, but together with the left hand, it works somehow, and he doesn't reject it.
Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of reconnective healing is that it can be learned.
Now, I didn't believe that this was something one can learn. I thought it was something only Eric was capable of doing. I didn't think I could acquire these skills too, and help you, my neighbor, my friend. But in the course of the program, right away we saw for ourselves that yes, you can indeed learn to help others. If you see the living example standing in front of your eyes, as we see our own child, then I think that yes, you believe it.
There are amazing healings taking place all the time. Yet, traditional allopathic medicine has no model or explanation for how these healings can occur.
We don't understand how it is that even the simplest thing, like the healing from a wound that is so mundane that every child has experienced it, we don't have a full understanding of how that occurs.
The answers may lie in the fundamental shift which is occurring in our understanding of our universe.
Virtually every ancient culture and every native culture has thought of the universe as a unity, as a circle, and man is being central to that. And it was only with the discoveries of Isaac Newton and René Descartes that ripped us out of the fabric of our universe and created this clockwork model where mind is separate from body and that we are separate from each other. And that idea of separation is the foundation of Western thinking. Now, Newton described a very well-behaved universe of separate things operating in space and time according to fixed laws. The idea of the body as machine. The body is this well-behaved machine with the two engines of the body being the brain and the heart, and the whole central orchestra being conducted by DNA. That's the model we have. And we think of various processes being localized in certain parts of the body. What's wrong with that is just about everything. Body is completely decentralized. There is no central brain in a sense, and that the brain is closer to an antenna receiver. It's closer to a transducer of information, a receiver and a transmitter of information, but not the central repository of that information.
In our conventional world of biochemistry and cellular biology, we focus on the Newtonian belief of a material world. Through the history of science, we focus on the mechanical reality and have let go of the concept of energy and fields as information in biology. That's the Newtonian perspective that says, focus on the matter, don't pay attention to the rest of the stuff. Except that we're now recognizing that the mind, which is an energetic field of thought, which you can read with EEG wires on your brain, or even more interesting is a new process called magnetoencephalograph called MEG. While electroencephalograph, you put wires on the skin and read brain activity, magnetoencephalograph is a probe outside of the head, and it reads the fields of neural activity without even touching the body. So it basically says that when you're processing with your brain, you're broadcasting fields.
1875 to 1920 was this enormous growth of biochemistry, and it was then thought that chemistry is probably, we're a chemical machine. The answer is to put the right chemical in the body and you'll get better. To a point, that's correct, but it doesn't appear to be correct for chronic disease. It's correct in the short term. There was a major intellectual split going on at the time in physics, because the old Newtonian world, the clockwork universe, was going strong, and a few crackpots in Denmark, Germany, and to a lesser extent England, developed quantum physics and said that it doesn't work the way you said it works. It doesn't happen like that. And there were huge anomalies found in physics that could not be explained. And the upshot of this was that the old idea of a mechanical universe, where everything happens for a specific reason in its own way, had to be dropped.
Quantum physics changed our perception of reality over 80 years ago. Surprisingly, this new viewpoint has yet to be incorporated into our current biology model.
The main problem with the current biological model is that it's reductionist and mechanistic. That means, first, it tries to explain everything in terms of little bits, generally molecules, because they're the smallest things in organisms. And secondly, it tries to treat the organism as a machine that works simply in terms of physics and chemistry.
Chemical reaction in the body is supposed to be central, and the main reason it occurs, according to current theory, is through molecular collision, so that one molecule collides into another, and that's how they have this information, and how we have a cascade of chemical processes. Now, if you think of the usual cell, a cell is like a swimming pool, and molecules are like a couple of tennis balls in that swimming pool. And according to this theory, one tennis ball is supposed to find another tennis ball in this vast body of water and do so instantaneously. And that is supposed to account for all the millions of instantaneous activities that occur in our body at every second. And that's ludicrous.
The existing control system of modern medicine is enzymes, hormones, not consciousness, not emotions, not body field. All that is there as your control system is enzymes and hormones. And we find this a bit inadequate to explain the whole majesty of human behavior and sickness and the whole darn thing. It's impossible.
Today's medicine still works on the old paradigm of physics, which dates back to the time of Newton and the primacy of matter. Modern physics has long ago eliminated that paradigm and understands that it is not matter, but mind or spirit, which is primary. Though it isn't defined as spirit, but as energy fields, as intelligent energy fields.
We look to science as some sort of absolute truth and a story that's already been written. But the reality is that science is a story told in installments, and every new chapter oftentimes refines or completely changes what has come before.
This intellectual pendulum swing, and it's swinging towards the idea of holism and looking at how an entire system works together. Whereas, you see, the doctors began to look at how each individual cell works, and they got down to the cellular level. That's all been done for 100 years. Great, we understand it a lot. But we don't understand how the cells talk to each other and how they deal with information.
When I was 15 years old, I had a very serious motorcycle accident. I was on a motorcycle I shouldn't have been on, and we were hit by a car that caused a very serious wound in my leg. Ended up with 66 stitches. At the point of impact, I clearly remember having an out-of-body experience where my consciousness watched my body tumbling through the air and ultimately landing. And it was sort of shocking to me when I kind of came back into the body. That said to me that perhaps my consciousness isn't just in my brain, but that it is imbued with more quality than that. And then as I was facing a very serious outcome, they talked about the possibility of having to amputate part of my leg. I remember laying with a cast from my hip down to my ankle and thinking about how to rally my immune system through my thoughts such that I could promote healing in my leg. And so I would lay on the couch and I would visualize my immune system, and I could feel it tingling. I could feel the healing happening in my leg. And I didn't come from a medical family. I have no idea at all where this idea came from. But somehow it was noetic. It came directly to me that that was what I needed to do. And ultimately they took the cast off, and I'm a two-legged creature still, thank goodness. And so I think that there was something about, my own personal experience with that healing, that there was something about recognizing that my mind was important to my body, and my body was important to my mind, that I just knew intuitively.
Mind, intention, belief. Can these factors influence healing?
If you think you have an incurable disease, if you think it yourself, you are right. If you think your problem is curable, then you are also right. It all depends on your intention.
When you think about intention, what is intention? And how does intention play a role in healing? Intention plays a role when you think about how our thoughts and our emotions and our cognitions influence our immune system and our endocrine system. And we know that this happens. We know that people who feel a tremendous amount of stress, for example, have a diminished capacity in terms of their immune system's functioning.
It's been discovered in the laboratory over the last 15 or 20 years, for example, that intention does have physical effects.
So, for example, we recently conducted a study where we recruited couples, one of whom had cancer. And we took the partner of the cancer patient and we trained them in what we called a compassionate intention program. And so they were invited in to participate in a training program. A lot of it had to do with meditation, it had to do with heart opening, it had to do with subtle energies. And we took them through this training program, and then we asked them to go home and continue to practice this intervention for 8 weeks. We brought them back and we put them in our laboratory, and we monitored the patient in one room, and we put them in a 2,000-pound electromagnetically shielded room so that there was no possibility of electromagnetic fields or the partner of the cancer patient talking to them on their radio, on their cell phone, and saying, okay, breathe deeply now. We could rule out any of those kind of conventional explanations. Meanwhile, the partner who'd gone through the training program sat in another room and watched the image of their loved one on a closed-circuit television screen. And then at random times throughout the session, they were asked to send loving, compassionate intention to the patient. The idea was to see if we could find correlations between the intention of the one person and the physiological activity of the other. What we found is that there was a significant correlation in the physiological activity of this person and the physiological activity of the other. This suggests that there is some way in which information is transferred that isn't accountable by the conventional Newtonian model of cause and effect. You know, the partner of the cancer patient wasn't coming in and whispering in their partner's ear, calm down now. You know, quite the contrary. They were at a distance and there was no way that the two people knew when this kind of interaction was happening, and yet it happened.
Sending an intention that I am better, sending information with belief that I am better, is sending information to the body to correct itself. Because as we say, a thought is an actual physical energy too. And it sends information to the body as well.
It's been very well demonstrated that our belief system affects how we behave and how we perform. And it also affects our lifestyle. So if we don't believe that we can help ourselves, we probably cannot. If we don't believe that positive information is useful to our health and well-being, then it probably won't be.
Our thoughts create our body moment by moment. When we think positive thoughts, we release certain chemicals into our body. When we think negative thoughts, we release negative chemicals into our body. And those have a profound effect on how the cells are behaving and how the nutrition is being used. It's very obvious to me, working as an osteopath, that the stress that people hold in their body has various patterns according to how they're thinking.
Probably the most essential aspect of healing is to believe in the modality you're using and to stay positive in some way. There's so much evidence about belief in a system of medicine being crucial to the effectiveness of that. I used to say to people who have cancer, after researching the limitations of things like chemotherapy, don't have chemotherapy, it only works 9% of the time. I don't do that anymore. And the reason I don't is that I believe that belief itself is the body's strongest medicine. And if you believe something is going to work, regardless of what that is, it's going to work for you. There was a study in Houston of some patients going through a knee operation for arthritis. Half actually went through an operation where they were worked on for their arthritis. The other half were given a sham operation where they just opened the knee and then closed it and did nothing. They found over 3 years of follow-up that both sets of patients reported having no pain. So the patients where nothing was done to them still reported being pain-free. Their arthritis was gone. There have been other studies looking at if there's any difference between going to the gym and thinking about going to the gym. And with this study, they took a group of people and they sent half to the gym to work on their biceps. And the other half were allowed to sit in their armchairs and just think about going to the gym and working on their biceps. And they still recorded a very strong effect in the group who had just sat in their armchairs. The couch potatoes still built up their biceps. So the body really can't distinguish between, action and thought. And you see this most clearly with the placebo effect.
Traditional Western medicine typically attributes spontaneous or miraculous healing to placebo. But what exactly is the placebo effect?
The placebo effect is the fact that a belief that a person has can override their biology. Well, it's so profoundly important that science has recognized that at least 1/3 of all healings, including drugs and surgery and other allopathic interventions, 1/3 of all healings has nothing to do with the process, but has to do with the placebo effect. That a person believes that the process is going to heal them and heals themselves in spite of the fact that maybe the pill was a sugar pill or the operation was just a sham and wasn't real. And why this becomes important is clearly 1/3 of all healings occurs without anybody doing anything other than having a positive thought. And what interests me as a biologist and former professor in a medical school is how we can talk about the placebo effect for about 15 minutes in a pharmacology course and then totally ignore the relevance of thought and mental processes on biology for the rest of medical education, so that our doctors are not really using the placebo effect effectively, that we're not even studying the placebo effect, and right now we could cut the healthcare cost by exactly 1/3 by just using the placebo effect.
It seems time that we began to shift the lens and start really focusing on what is the nature of the placebo. How is it that you can take an inert substance, something that has no known medicinal capacity, potential, and that inert substance not only can create physiological changes in the body, but actually somehow is able to manage a whole cascade of responses within a very complex system, such that it can target the liver or the kidney or the lungs. That is a great mystery, and we don't understand that, and much more needs to be done.
I would say that what medicine calls the placebo effect is, by all means, an effect that is created through energy fields. As we often say, one has to believe in it, then it will